This is Aner Dyfan Teaches From the Depths simple prop plane tutorial. In my previous episodes on building planes, that is basic plane utilising roll and basic plane utilising yaw turnings, I had a plane very similar to this sort of one here, which you utilise thrusters in order to make those manoeuvres. And as was pointed out in the comments, that this is essentially a thruster craft rather than a more conventional plane. And I should have really mentioned that during those videos, so thank you very much for that comment. And what I'm going to do in this video is correct that and do a more conventional plane utilising ailerons, wings and actual prop dedi-blades. So in this episode I'm going to create a simple prop plane, and this is going to actually have no engine whatsoever because the dedi-blades can produce a small amount of thrust in their own right, and also it will have no thrusters whatsoever. So I will be making extensive use of ailerons and wings in order to get the required propulsion. So I'm just going to build a basic hull now. So here we have a very basic hull, and now I need to apply the actual wings. So you need to go into the air tab and attach a load of wings. Wings only really work when you're moving forwards. As you can see here, they provide lift per force per speed. So if you're going slow, they won't provide anywhere near as much lift. This is one reason why I want to be utilising dedi-blades, because dedi-blades will work underwater or in the air, whereas normal thrusters will only provide thrust when they're in the air. So if you fall in the water, nothing will happen. So what I'm doing here, I'm just adding wings so the centre of lift is in line with the centre of mass, and then I'm going to replace some of these ones with ailerons. The ailerons going to be adding in line with the centre of mass like that, so when they provide their turning force, it does so along that centre of mass, thus providing the best motion around there and not providing any spiral motion to the vehicle. Next, I'm going to add a fairly large tailplane on. The plane is going to be using a roll to turn, but having a good sized tailplane on will definitely help. But that's probably a little bit too large. So let's just cut that down a little bit, make it a little bit more conventional, I guess. Something a bit like that. And there we go, we do have a simple plane shape. It's not particularly useful, but this has no engine requirement. And so this would actually be useful as a scout plane. Put a strategic antenna on the base here and fly it around to various tiles on the map to discover them. Next, we need to add on the dedi-blade spinner. So this is going to add on the front here, and going to need quite a bit of extensions. Doesn't matter what orientation these are, but because I have no engine, this needs to be quite strong. So let's go like four like that. I think will do nicely. So in order to control this dedi-blade, the AI can't do it directly, and the best way to do it is actually utilising a control block. So I'm just going to set this going all the time, so it'll always be going forwards, so I don't need to worry about planes slowing down or anything like that. So I want to activate it every few seconds. I could activate it on spawning, but then that can cause issues. Say if it's got damaged, then it won't reactivate. And it's going to be activating spin blocks. This is, I couldn't say all craft, but in case I add any weapons on, I don't want to be affecting the spin blocks. So it's around about 6 blocks away. I think it's only about 5, but because you have to include the block itself, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I set the rotation speed, and I would like to set it to full, and hopefully I've got it going the correct way. So if I unload caps lock, no, it is pulling forwards. There we go. It is slowly pulling forwards, and we do have lift. A small amount of lift here. And so it is actually in control. If I actually now do AI mainframe, is it turning? There we go, it is actually turning. Though unfortunately it is falling down. But unlike the thrustercraft, when this falls in the water, it will continue to get lift and will maybe get itself back out of the water. Nope, it's still not quite fast enough. Probably because the increased drag. So a way out of this is place a control block here. This one I'm going to activate when vehicle altitude or height above sea or ground is less than, if I say 10, then I wanted to activate balloon deployers and to activate them. And then I'm going to need another one here when altitude above ground is greater than, let's say, 40. That'll be balloon deployers deactivate. And now I need to set the AI to actually fly a bit higher. Otherwise what's going to happen is nothing will actually function. Got 150. About 70 there. So now this will fly higher. So these control blocks though will activate balloon deployers. So we need to put a couple of those on. See, they're raising the plane up, but they raised the rear end up first. So in fact, just going to take out the ones at the rear and just add on a few at the front, which bring the nose up out the water. So when they break apart, the plane is actually in the air, pointing the correct direction. So hopefully it can correct itself. So I'm just going to add on some additional wings to provide extra lift, and then also change a load of these ailerons here, because see the centre of mass has actually shifted slightly further back. It's also slightly, probably a little bit too high in the turning. So again, fall in under the water to reduce the extreme roll. So raise nose back up, and now as it turns, should correct itself. There we go. But still does have a tendency to fall under the water a little bit. Let's just try though. If just rather than going roll to turn, have this set for yaw to turn. So we'll just utilise these tail planes. For this I can actually add on a lot of the extra lift. So the ailerons will only be used for pitch control. And there we go. This is actually working okay. It's pretty slow, but this would be useful for a scout plane. If I wanted this machine to go faster, the easiest way is to add an engine on. So I'll quickly just put one of my little prefab engines on, just dump on a big fuel beam, and then I can set this to full motor drive. So here we go. Have much increased thrust there. I'm having a little bit of trouble pulling it out of sky because it's going very, very high up. Probably because it's now moving a lot faster, so the lift is actually too great for this plane. It can't pitch down enough, which is a bit odd. So let's just add on a couple of lead beams just to slow us down a bit. There you go, that will now help lower the plane into its more natural stage. And even so, the amount of thrust getting out of this dedi-blade with just this engine, the amount of power using is really minimal. Still, removing the engine and setting the motor drive back down to 0 and continuous mode does still work very nicely. And this plane is working. It's a touch slow compared to thrusters, but this is very, very easily scalable. can easily add on more, and this consumes absolutely no resources whatsoever. So would actually be very useful, and costs not that much. So it's a lot cheaper than thrusters, because compare this to a thruster. So the jet engine themselves is 500 or 450 for a huge jet engine. And to power this, I would need quite a few of these jet engines. So I'd need basically one in each orientation. So I'd have 1, 2, 3, 4 at the front, probably one for the lift, and then maybe a couple at the rear. So I have half a dozen. That's 300-400 materials. Then you have the engine and then the very expensive fuel tanks, and suddenly you're up to 600 materials, which is half the cost of this material, of the material currently used in this plane. A practical application, as I said before, would be as a radar plane. So let us put a strategic antenna on, and then put on a load of dish pieces. What this is doing is adding to the weight of the craft and cost, and making it a lot harder to turn. So because this is likely to be out of combat, I don't need its fast turning. A nice slow turning would be fine. So the just yaw to turn would be fine, utilising this tail plane. Fortunately, I am losing altitude. It's because the speed of this is a lot lower now with that very, very heavy component at the base. Drag, as you can see, the drag is below the centre of mass and the centre of lift, and the centre of thrust, which is along this line. So the centre of thrust is it's just above the centre of mass, but the centre of drag is below, which is what's causing this angled flight. So to make it back into a stable flight, I've readjusted the centre of thrust in line with the centre of drag. And it's just dipped into the water because I've only just reconfigured that location. So it's now pulling back up into the air, which is good, but it's still not quite strong enough. So I need to increase these dedi-blades lengthwise. There we go. I have greatly increased the size of the dedi-blades, which should provide an increased amount of thrust. Still, it's a little bit slow. I'm pulling the nose up there a bit too heavily with the balloon deployers. So I'll probably just delete a couple. The other thing I have done, I've added a load more tailplanes on. That will provide a better turning force and also a little bit more lift at the rear there, which is always useful. So it allows different pitching and that to be utilised. Still, as a little scout plane for scouting out tiles, this is very cheap, only costing 1,500 materials. This is a bit more expensive than my other design, my little balloon design, which I've utilised in the campaign. That is the radar balloon, which is only a mere 600 materials, but that does feel a little bit cheaty compared to this, which is a functional plane rather than just a radar sticking on the bottom of a balloon. There you have it then. That is a simple, more conventional prop aileron and wing plane. I hope you found this very useful, and it's filled in some of the gaps I've missed out on my other plane tutorials. Thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you soon. Until then.